Matthew 26, verse 47, it says, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Greetings, Rabbi. Kissed him. Jesus replied, Do what you came for, friend. Then the man stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached out for his sword, drew it, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then will the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way? In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then the disciples deserted him and fled. May the Lord add his blessing to this reading and hearing of his holy word. Well, in 2020, Newsweek reported that evangelical pastor Rick Joyner, in an independent interview, had urged Christians to mobilize to fight a civil war in our nation against left-wing activists. He said, we're in time for war. We need to recognize that. We need to mobilize. We need to get ready. Joyner also said that he had seen in a dream that militias would pop up like mushrooms and they would be backed by God. He went on to say that contemporary veterans experienced in urban warfare would rise as leaders in these God-backed militias that would be fighting in our very own streets. This is a voice from within the American church. A particularly disturbing voice as he calls for people of faith to physically, literally pick up weapons and go marching in the battle against our fellow countrymen who have different morality, a different worldview. The comforting thing is that in the comments section of this article on the Newsweek website, there were a number of believers on there avowing that this is not how many in mainstream American Christianity see things. We're not all spoiling for a fight. But at the same time, we must acknowledge that these are tumultuous times for followers of Jesus in our nation. Our liberties and freedoms are being encroached on in our country. Christians are being discriminated against for their faith in some pockets within the United States. Just last week, I read an article about a school board in Arizona that had voted to stop accepting student teachers from a local college because it was a Christian college. And the college, in its official, who we are statements, they espoused Christian morality and said they require their students to live accordingly, which is not unusual for a Christian college. I have experienced the same thing when I went to Geneva College. But the school board in Arizona concluded, therefore, that any student attending that college would be unable to treat all of the district's younger students equally, who might live out a different morality or a different worldview. They wouldn't be able to treat them with dignity and respect. So they made that distinction based solely on a college student's faith, based on their association with a Christian college. They pretty much said Christians are not permitted to teach in our publicly funded schools because they are Christians and they think and believe like Christians. And I read that and I said, well, can't wait for the lawsuit on that one. And just Friday, after I wrote this, I saw another article. There is a lawsuit against that school board for religious discrimination, as there should be. But, that's kind of what we see. What do we do in our society right now? Do we go marching into battle with guns literally loaded to ensure our freedoms? Or do we roll over and let the increasingly anti-Christian culture take away our liberties one at a time until nothing is left? What do we do when we are confronted or in some way limited or even attacked or persecuted for our faith? Whether it's in a collective sense, as we see in these national discussions, or on a personal level. a one-on-one sense in our daily lives as we interact with others who may or may not share our faith. Believe it or not, this account out of Matthew 26 today, in which Jesus is arrested the night before his crucifixion, it gives us some perspective on how to approach these questions. We see how Jesus, in a situation like this, we see how he reacted. And in our ongoing efforts to become like Jesus, which is always the goal, folks, we can react the same way when we take a look at how Jesus reacted. So how did Jesus react? Let's go over this. We skip forward a little bit in Matthew 26 from where we were. Where we get to tonight, it's later in the evening after the Last Supper, which is where we were last Sunday. If you missed that, go watch it online. But some things have happened. Jesus and his disciples have made their way from the place where they had the Last Supper to the Mount of Olives, specifically the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus has now already predicted that before dawn, Peter will have denied knowing or having anything to do with Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And of course, Peter said, "Oh, that'll never happen." But we all know it happened, right? Yeah. By this point, Jesus has already gone off into the garden alone to pray 3 times, each time coming back to find his disciples sleeping, rather than remaining alert and watching as he had asked them to. And as Jesus is still rebuking them for giving into their earthly desires, in this case, their earthly desire for sleep, something we all understand this morning on Daylight Savings Day, right? As he's still rebuking them for it, things go downhill real fast. He's still talking when Judas arrives with an armed crowd sent by the Jewish authorities to arrest Jesus. You see, Judas has told them, he's led them right where to find Jesus late at night, away from the crowds, so that they could arrest Jesus without fear of Jesus inciting a riot or inciting the crowd to violence as they thought he might. Judas just brings with us, here he is. And Judas had arranged to signal with them so he could identify Jesus. Because remember, these are the days before social media, so they couldn't just creep on Jesus' Facebook profile to see his pictures, to see what he looked like. Yeah, you've all done it, right? Yeah. Those of you who are on Facebook. Judas didn't even have a photograph. He hold up and say, "Oh, this is the guy we're after. Get him," right? No. So Judas tells them, "The one I kiss, he's the man. Arrest him." It's actually kind of clever, because this wouldn't be any different than what Judas would have done any time he came back into Jesus' presence. It would have been customary for a student to greet his rabbi with a brotherly kiss. So upon coming to the scene, Judas immediately goes to Jesus, and he does what he always does. He greets him with a kiss. He says, "Greetings, Rabbi." And you get Jesus still calling him friend. His friend, do what you came for. So Judas does it, and his betrayal was complete. And at this point, the armed cabal seizes Jesus and arrests him. And in all this time, there's no objection from Jesus. There's no fight. There's no grandstanding by Jesus. There's no argument from Jesus. There's no hitting. There's no punching. There's no tackling. There's no violence at all. You see, because of his relationship with God, Jesus is presented with the opportunity, I would say, a very strong compulsion to fight. They wanted to arrest him and get rid of him because of who he was in following the Father God in heaven. And for that, he's put in a situation where you're going to want to fight, but he doesn't. He allows himself to be arrested, which is just so completely contrary to everything we think. And so we learn a couple things from Jesus about what to do when people come at us, when they come against us for our faith, or maybe they even persecute us because of our faith. When we're tempted to go to battle and get into fights over matters of faith, we can look at what Jesus did. You see, when tempted to be quick to fight, Jesus actually de-escalates the situation by instead confronting the trigger-happy people who were on his side. See, not only does Jesus say, "No, I'm not going to go to violence, I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to get in an argument," he seeks to diffuse it in others who are with him, keep them from getting into it. See, Matthew tells us that one of the disciples gives into that urge to go to fight and fight real fast, right? Grabs his sword, which he's got with him, and he just starts swinging. And he cuts off the ear of the high priest's servant who was there with those who were to arrest Jesus. Luke tells us that guy's name is Malchus. Right? Now, John tells us in his gospel that it's Peter. Peter's the one who takes the sword and doesn't, of course it's Peter, brash, act now, think later Peter, right? It's just like us. Right? He's the one who does this. Luke actually tells us a little bit later, before actually leaving the scene, being carried away from the scene, Jesus actually touches the guy's ear and kills it. But first, Jesus stops Peter. He says, stop it. He rebukes Peter. He says, put your sword back in its place. Put it away. And can you imagine the reaction of the crowd upon hearing and seeing this? They had come to arrest Jesus, and so they had come with their own weapons. They were expecting to kind of have to put down a little revolt here. But then it's Jesus, the man they're after, who kind of steps forward and just stops it before it starts. Jesus tells Peter, put your sword away. He says, I have 12 weeks. More than 66,000 angels is what that would be. He says, I have 66,000 angels. I can call at any moment to take care of this, to win this battle. But Jesus doesn't call on them. Instead, he tells Peter, stop fighting. Put your sword away. It's like he's saying, I don't need you to go to war for me. I've got this covered. And I think so often when we are quick to get into fights and arguments for our faith, not to defend the faith, but to defend our rights to live out of faith. We're so quick to get into fights for that. It's often a sign that we don't fully trust God. We don't fully trust that He's got things covered here. And the interesting thing is, earlier in the evening during the Last Supper, Jesus had indicated that times were coming when His followers might need to have a sword. You know, in his discussion of the Last Supper, Luke gives us this. He said to them, but now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy. The disciple said, see, Lord, here are 2 swords. That's enough. He replied. See, Jesus here warns his disciples that things are going to get rough for them. So it might be that you need to have something to defend yourself, right? If you don't have a sword, you need to get one. You might need it. And it seems his disciples, they've been all ready for Jesus to say this, right? They've been waiting for this. They immediately, they pull out 2 swords. They've had them all along. They're like, all right, Jesus, here are 2 swords. Let's go. And Jesus immediately just says, that's enough. That's enough. Stop it. I'm not calling you to fight. See, Jesus gives them the warning that violence may come, but the indication is that responding by fighting, that's the rare occasion. See, we're presented with an opportunity to fight those who oppose his mission. Jesus declines, instead seeks to stop others from getting into the battle. The second thing we see, when tempted to be quick to fight, Jesus refocuses on the mission of God. You see, instead of making the goal of his life fighting the fight, Jesus keeps his focus on the work God has sent him to do. Look at our passage today, Matthew 26:55. Jesus said to the crowd, am I leading a rebellion that you've come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. See, Luke 19, Jesus had said that he had come to seek and to save the lost. That's why he came, to seek and to save the lost. And he points out here that that's what he had been doing all along, every day, in the temple courts, in a public place. He's there teaching the people, teaching the lost how to be saved, teaching them how to find their way back to God. That was his mission. That's what he was here for. And even at this moment, when this cabal comes, wanting to fight with him as they arrest him, Jesus isn't having it. Because he's focused on the mission, to teach how to be saved, to show people how to get back to God. Jesus' attitude is pretty much, I'm not going to fight with you, because I'm here for something much greater. It's what I've been doing all along. Teaching how to be saved, showing others how to get with God. And as they arrest him, he's not focused on his rights, he's focused on his mission. So often when we're quick to get into fights and arguments with those who don't share our faith, it's because we're focused on the wrong thing. We are focused on our rights instead of being focused on the mission God calls us to, which is the same as that of Jesus Christ, to love and serve God and to teach others how to be saved. So we get into battles. We can get into battles that are worthwhile, but those battles cause us, we're so busy fighting that fight that we lose sight of the mission, right? Last year, saw the overturning of Roe versus Wade, a joyous occasion that I thought I would never see. I thought it would never happen. But it did. It was a joyous occasion. But I remember a year before that, I was sitting in this office here. I was in my seat at the desk, and that chair that's sitting there, Pastor Pete sat, my brother-in-law was sitting there, and we were having a discussion about abortion in the United States. And we both agreed that even if Roe versus Wade should somehow be overturned, very little would change because people's hearts weren't being changed. Because we were so focused on fighting that political fight that we kind of lost focus of the mission, right? To show people how to be saved. And guess what? Now that Roe versus Wade has thankfully been overturned, we still have abortion on demand in Pennsylvania. You know why? Because people's hearts aren't changed. As followers of Jesus, it's important we remain engaged in the political concerns that go on around us. But that can never be our focus. Winning the political battles can never be our main goal. As the church, our main goal, like Jesus, is to teach others how to be saved. We've got to keep our eyes on that so that they, when they are saved, they can be with God forever. So that Jesus can go to work changing their hearts. Because when people's hearts are changed, you don't need the law. Because it's not going to do it. You know, in the 90s and the 2000s, so much effort was made by Christians to stop what is called gay marriage. Winning that battle became the primary goal of so many people in faith. So much so that we took our eyes off the main mission, teaching others how to be saved. We lost the battle against gay marriage in our culture. And now so many who are lost are even further from Jesus because we weren't out there on the mission. You see, instead of being quick to fight, Jesus refocused on the mission of God. And we need to do that too. And finally, when tempted to be quick to fight, Jesus instead takes comfort in the promises and the plan of God. See, the cabal has seized Jesus. They probably put him in handcuffs or chains or something. And yet Jesus doesn't fight physically or verbally. Right? He does say some things, but it's not like a confrontation. You know, he continues what he's saying by saying, this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. It's the second time in this passage, Jesus refers to, hey, this is happening according to what was said in the prophets, according to what God's plan is. See, instead of fighting, Jesus focuses on what God has said through his prophets. Jesus knows that God has never failed to keep even just one little promise made through his prophets. God has kept every promise, worked through history, worked through individuals, worked through nations, to bring about his great purposes and to carry out his plan. Through it all, every promise God has kept. So Jesus, when he's in a really unfair, really dark situation, in a situation in which every fiber of his being must have been screaming at him, you need to fight, fight, fight. Instead, he keeps remembering that God has spoken, keeps trusting in God's plan, keeps trusting in God's promises. See, when you're faced with a difficult situation because of your faith, when you're laughed at, when you're demeaned, when you're dismissed, maybe even you're persecuted, look to God's promises. Instead of immediately fighting and arguing, look to God's promises. See his plan. God's promise to you is that he will never leave you or forget about you. He will work out every bad thing in your life for his greater good, whether you see it ever or not. It will be done He will go with you wherever you go, through whatever you go through. He will care for your needs even better than he cares for the needs of the birds of the air and the flowers of the field, which are always cared for. He will ultimately deliver you through whatever trials you experience to your eternal home in his glorious presence forever. That's his promise. You know why we so often want to fight with others who oppose our faith? So often it's because we forget about God's promises. We forget God has told us he has a plan, and he will work it out in us and through us and around us. We focus instead on ourselves and what we want and what we think that we have to do, what we have to handle things all on our own so that it gets done. See, when we're trusting in ourselves like that, all we can do is fight. That's all we got. But when we remember and trust in the promises of God, then in those moments when we are tempted to just start fighting right away, we can instead say with the Apostle Paul, I'm convinced that neither life nor death, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. See, nothing in this world throws at us can take us away from Christ and the promise he has made to us. Nothing that the world does can stop the plan of God going forward, so we don't have to fight. We can remain in the peace of God's promise. Doesn't mean we never defend ourselves, but it means we're not ready to fight right away. We're not just going to start battling over every little thing. It requires that we take our eyes off ourselves and our rights, and instead put them on the hope of God. In the book of Exodus, we kind of talked about this a little bit last week. The people of Israel have been enslaved in Egypt for hundreds of years. And God had sent Moses to tell the Egyptians, let them go. But the Egyptians said no, so God sent the 10 plagues to convince them, right? And eventually after the 10th plague, the people of Egypt are convinced, and they tell the people of Israel, get out, go, we're releasing you. And so the people of Israel, they make their way out of Egypt, their exodus from Egypt, and into the desert, their escape from slavery. Except for as they are going, just when they are out of Egypt finally, the Egyptians and Pharaoh realize, what have we done? We've lost all our slaves. And so Pharaoh mustered his army to pursue them and bring them back. We're going to get the slaves back. And so the people of Israel, they look up, and there in the distance was bearing down on them the Egyptian army. Now, they were slaves. They just wandered out into the desert. They've got no weapons, no structure, no organization. Only what they're carrying on their backs is what they've got. And now here come the Egyptians. They're either going to carry us back into slavery or they're going to kill us. So panic sets in the Israelite camp. But Moses, their leader, prays to God. And God gives this message through Moses to the people. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. That's God's promise. Right? You can be still and at peace because I'll do the fighting. And God kept his promise. He fought for the Israelites. All through the night, God created a wall of sorts of dark and light. So it was light on the side that the Israelites wanted, so they could see where they were going, they could get to where they were going. But on the Egyptian side, it was total darkness. So that they were falling around, all around the Israelites, all throughout the night, but they couldn't see them, they could never capture them. The Israelites finally eventually come to the Red Sea, they're trapped between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army, and God says, not a problem, Moses, hold your staff out and spread it. And God parts the waters of the Red Sea. And all the people of Israel, they crossed through that passage on dry ground to safety. When the Egyptians finally catch up to them and see them, they try to go through the passage on their own. At which point, God just closes up the sea over top of them. It just comes crashing down on top of them. And they're all destroyed. The Egyptian army. This is God fighting. As only God can fight, much better than anything the Israelites would have come up with on their own. See, when we're tempted to be quick to fight ourselves, this is God's promise. The Lord will fight for you. you need only be still. See, Jesus knew the promise of God, knew God had a plan. And so he remained still. Can you follow him and do likewise? You see, when Jesus handled the situation this way, the disciples didn't understand it. This is not how they expected the confrontation between Jesus and the authorities would go when it finally came. But this is how it went. So they fled. They deserted Jesus. You see, what I get from that is when you adopt the same posture of Jesus, when you are attacked for your faith, that posture is this, I don't have to fight with you. People around you might not understand why you're not going into battle. They might be like the apostles, right? Or the disciples. They're gathering around you and they're saying, come on, let's fight, let's go, let's go. What are you going to do then? Are you going to follow the crowd? Or are you going to follow Jesus?